Calling all instructional technology coaches, Forward Edge has launched a new hub for coaches to find strategies and resources to use for their coaching. The EDU Coach Network provides a place for instructional coaches to come together for coach-specific professional development, building a community, and finding mentorship moving through the school year. The network provides a place to casually seek resources or join in with book clubs, Twitter chats, webinars, and workshops, along with much more. Join the EDU Coach Network by going to educoachnetwork.com and join the coach community today.
Aloha, I'm Katie Ritter.
And I'm Justin Thomas, and this is the Restart Recharge podcast, a podcast by coaches for coaches. We bring the tips and tricks to help you in your everyday work as an instructional coach or whatever they call you in your school district.
So hopefully you're going to leave this episode with us today feeling just a little bit less on your own coaching island.
All right, as coaches, we are asked to plan professional development for our district throughout the school year. One great idea to connect your PD is throughout the school year is to create a year-long theme that will connect all of the learning you can provide for your teachers. So today we are going to take a look at how you can plan a theme and structure for a year-long PD that will be valuable to your school district. And we have the world famous Tyler Irwin join us once again for this episode here. So just in case you're not sure who Tyler is the Assistant Director of Curriculum and Integration at Forward Edge. He has 6 years of classroom experience, including 4 years as a 7th grade language arts teacher. Currently, he serves as a Google certified trainer and mentor coach. He's entering his 6th year as an instructional coach and supports partner districts by delivering training, conducting formal coaching, and offering consultation and more. So welcome in once again, Tyler.
Well, thanks, guys. It's good to be back on. I don't know about world famous, but I mean, hey, in the moment, I'm definitely not going to say no if that's what you want to introduce me as. So thanks again. It's good to be on for sure.
Sheesh, 6 years, Tyler?
Going into my 6th year. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. This podcast, the intro serves as a reminder to me of how long people have been here, because I feel like every time someone gets introduced, I'm like wowed that it has been that long. So yeah, glad to have you back. Okay, I think I'm kicking it off today. So we, as Justin said, are going to be talking about Thematic PD, and it's kind of a good time of year. We're back in the swing of things by the time this podcast is coming out, but still plenty of time to put some things in place. So before we dive in, Tyler, will you give us an overview of kind of what is Thematic PD that spans throughout the year or the semester? What might it look like, and kind of what are some of the benefits that you've seen to doing it in the past?
So it can take a lot of different forms, that's for sure. I know some people will structure it as like breakfast bites before school. They might do like an happy hour after school. You may do something like lunch and learns. You may have in-service days that you have PD on. This could be maybe versions of that sort of PD, but it's more so meant to support some sort of specific initiative or theme across the entire school year. Typically, if you can, you want to align that with some of the district goals, some of the school goals. You want to align yourself with the principals and what they're looking for and how they're trying to build culture, or how they're trying to sharpen their own staff and their teaching skills. And so now that you mentioned I've been doing this for going on 6 years, I had kind of written down the different thematic PDs that I had done in the past. And some of them aligned to like a new LMS that the district was adopting. So it was very tool-centric. Others aligned more to, I would say, like ideas or good instructional practice that the school really wanted to harp on and, kind of bring out and enhance. And so we had some on STEAM and STEM and design thinking right as the school was getting ready to get a makerspace. And then others have been around things like new teacher evaluation systems like OTES 2.0 last year here in the state of Ohio. And then this year, I think the big one that I'm kind of aligning even to like our webinar series that we do here at Forward Edge is I have a whole yearly PD theme on reigniting your passion for teaching. So focusing on different things that teachers can do to like get that passion back, to get that excitement back. We all know that the period of COVID, it was really hard on teachers. It was hard on students. And in many ways, they're still feeling the effects of that. And so it's meant to kind of combat that, to reignite that passion, and to give them some really good tangible ways that they can have fun in the classroom again, to enjoy the job of teaching again. So that just gives you like a pretty wide gamut, that some are very targeted, building initiatives, new tools. Some are a little bit more like just the relevant vibe or feeling that you get around the staff. But it's always rooted in like working with the principals and the schools to see what the staff needs. So just trying to support that to the best of my ability and make sure that teachers have something to go back to throughout the year to build their own skills.
Nice.
That's awesome. Now, obviously, it really does work very well for it to be attached to what the school district is doing. Let's say you got a situation where a principal comes up to you and they're like, hey, we want you to do something PD wise. I don't really know where we should go with this. How do you kind of plan what is best for the teachers if you're kind of given free reins and you don't necessarily have kind of that target spot where you got like a new LMS or you got a makerspace coming or something along those lines? How do you kind of go about picking out what is the best theme or tools to really kind of use to teach for the teachers?
So I always meet with all of the building admin the first week of August. They typically, at least the school district I serve, they go a little dark the last few weeks of July, and we really haven't like wrapped our minds around it yet in the beginning of June or July. So the first week of August tends to be a good time to meet and sit down with them. And you're right, if there's not like a very obvious choice for this year-long PD theme, I'll come to the table with a few that I think are a good fit for our discussion. And so I try and pick maybe one instructional strategy that we could maybe just really blow up and kind of expand throughout the year. I may focus on something that's a little bit more fun, just something, once again, I typically do, and we'll get into this later, but I typically do my year-long PD sessions once a month during lunch. And so if I'm asking you to come once a month during your lunch period, it has to be short. It's got to be fun. It's got to be relevant. And so sometimes I'll maybe develop something around that sort of theme, something that would be fun and easy for them to use, maybe more workshop style. So I might bring that sort of idea to the table. And then they also are really good about giving me access to their building goals. And so I will look at those before I come into the meeting with the admin, just to give like maybe a third idea that would align to that. So whether it's focused on differentiation or better formative assessment, or maybe they're looking to build culture or better awareness to social emotional learning. I mean, there's so many different things that I've seen throughout the years in these building goals that you could expand into a year-long thematic PD. And then typically after we have a discussion about it, they might say, you know what, look, we're doing a bunch about the building goals during our in-service days. Let's try something a little bit different for your year-long PD program that you're going to do. So let's focus on this instructional strategy. Let's focus on this tool. Let's focus on the kind of the fun topic that you brought to the table. And that's typically how we decide on it. And then at that point, I go to work building out the structure, thinking about things like times, schedules, if the theme's going to be different for each building or if it's going to be the same. I mean, there's a lot of variables that then go into planning this out after we've actually decided on the theme for the year.
All right. Well, Tyler, you've answered a couple of my follow-up questions that I had in there. So thank you. We are going to take a quick break from our sponsors, and then we will be right back with Tyler.
Calling all instructional coaches. Join Forward Edge for Coaches Camp in summer of 2023. Coaches Camp is packed with high-quality professional development exclusively for you. Attendees will work with like-minded coaches on creating strategies for building teacher relationships, executing coaching cycles, and building a culture of coaching and tech integration within their school district. There are 2 opportunities to attend Coaches Camp in the summer of 2023. You can either join us virtually June 12th through the 14th, or come visit Cincinnati on July 27th and 28th. Please visit forward-edge.net/coachcamp to reserve your spot today.
Looking for a program that reaches all teachers in learning new tools to integrate in their lessons? Edu Badges is the answer. Edu is an anytime, anywhere badging program that is designed to take bite-sized tools for instruction and teach teachers how to use them. Edu has received the ISTE Seal of Alignment for educator standards, and each badge in our expanding library is aligned to the ISTE standards and the SAMR model. Learn more about the program that teachers call addicting at forward-edge.net/edubadges. Welcome back to the Restart Recharge podcast. Justin Thomas, Katie Ritter here. As always, we have Tyler Irwin joining us here on this episode, talking about how you can create a thematic structure for your PD that is year long. So we've kind of talked a little bit about it already, but Tyler, how do you exactly go about structuring this year long PD and making some of those connections to teaching strategies there?
Yeah, I mean, I've changed this up over the years. Now that it's, like I said, going into my 6th year, I used to do it twice a month. And then I would also typically start.
I was impressed there for a second.
No, me too.
Not twice a week. Well, I guess technically when I was at different buildings, right, I'm offering this multiple times a week, but the actual like sessions themselves really about twice a month. And I also started right in August when I first started doing this. And so over time, those have been some of the things that I've like just pulled back on a little bit. I typically start in September. I usually only do it about once a month, a different session, but at all the buildings I serve. And then I've also found that it's really good to just like poll the staff. Like, what has worked for you? During the time of COVID, we did it both in person, but I would also offer it virtually so they could attend via Zoom. I would record the session so they could watch them on demand. I wanted to make it as like accessible and available as possible. And so that's something that even now that we're kind of more back to normal, I've asked them again, was this valuable on demand? Did you actually watch the videos when you had the time? Would you prefer there to still be a virtual option because you'd rather eat lunch in your room and not come to a central place? Those are all good things to think about. And given that we don't decide on a topic until maybe the first week of August, like you have to get to work pretty quick to look at the different building schedules, to look at the time slots that are available, to create a structure for the entire year so that everyone knows, okay, it's going to be about, let's say 8 or 9 different sessions he's going to offer once a month. And by the end of it, it's only going to be about 8 or 9 of my lunch periods, but I'm going to have learned these things. And you want to convey all of that ahead of time. Typically, like when I get a before school in-service day, I might get 15 minutes that the principal gives me to kind of like lay out the plan and lay out the theme to everyone. And so it's really important to like start planning those things out right away. The other big one that I would say when it comes to structure, it's not necessarily like a scope and sequence sort of thing, but it's really good to find some sort of incentive to the program. Typically, this is voluntary. These don't fall on PD days. We already mentioned it's during people's lunch, at least when I do it. And so we've done different incentives throughout the years, but some were kind of built in. When I did like a Google Level 1 and Level 2 educator program for the year, they got to take the exam and become certified. Like that's kind of a built-in incentive, a challenge to give yourself. We've also found that contact hours are a really big incentive for some teachers who have a license renewal coming up. Whenever you can work with like administration or the local like LPDC department, whatever you got going on to incentivize them coming, that also helps with attendance. And if you pick a good theme, that should also like motivate them to come too, but that can be difficult sometimes. So those are all things that go into building a good structure that's like very clear, sets the expectations up for teachers, and then kind of allows them to know what to expect and where to be for the entire year.
I like the incentives idea, Tyler. I think that's a great suggestion. I know one thing a lot of folks on our team have had luck with another incentive as well. And I think most coaches, like most schools, have some connection with some sort of university to offer graduate credit. So I know a lot of our coaches will also like, hey, if you attend all of the sessions or X number out of all sessions, plus, this one other thing, maybe write a reflection or take and pass a certification exam or something, then you can also offer graduate credit. So I'd also encourage our coaches to like look into, whoever does your PD or high level curriculum folks, they more than likely have a connection to apply for grad credit if that's something that your district is willing to offer. That a lot of times gets a lot of folks attending too, because usually grad credit's a faster way to license recertification than a bunch of PD contact hours. So just another.
And I would even say too, with you talking about it, to just being flexible with what works best for the staff, I think is also important, because I've had a success too with, just being available to do it whenever and however. Like if they want it during lunch and learn, we'll do it. If you need it after school, we'll do it. There's times I had teachers that are like, can't do it this week, but maybe next week. All right, we'll change the time frame and do it next week. And that kept a lot of teachers coming and interested in the year long. Mine was Google level training, but still teachers were able to come because they felt that they were able to make the different dates, even if it was not possible for what date was scheduled. They still would have the opportunity to work around that and still get that session.
Tyler, I'm curious kind of on sort of branching off from this, but thinking about our coaches that, obviously to get some sort of incentive approved, you're going to need admin on board with what you're doing. So for those coaches that maybe aren't necessarily being brought to the table, having the conversations around district initiatives and what they'd like to see rolled out, they're not getting a new LMS. What advice would you have for those coaches to even sort of present something like this, to have this ongoing PD that we know is so important for professional development, for it to not be a one and done, but it to be ongoing. So if they're not giving the time at in-service days, they're not being brought to those table for discussions, what are some tips you would give those coaches to help them do this year-long ongoing PD?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I'm talking to you about my experience now with 5 years in tow for the district that I've served. It wasn't always that way. We didn't always have these collaborative discussions the first week of August. There wasn't always the expectation of like, what's next for Tyler and his year-long theme. It had to be built up to that point. And so I would go back to when I was shadowing you, Katie, and was kind of taking over for the district that... Yeah, no, but you were serving and like it was in a transition period. And we kind of brought like the Google Level 1 educator certification program to the principal and said, look, not only does this particular Google Workspace like integrate with Schoology, which is your LMS, but we also feel like there's so many new and cool things that teachers can do within Google Workspace that it would be a really cool like program for them to not only learn all the ins and outs, but then to start implementing with students. We brought that idea to the table. We had all of the topics in mind, the dates, how long it was going to go for, like the scope and sequence, all of those things were laid out, and we said, here you go. And it was very easy for him to just say, hey, let's do it. Let's introduce it to the staff like this week. I felt like it was pretty immediate, like he was excited about it. And so that would be my first tip, is have something ready that you feel like is a good fit, that you feel like is relevant, that teachers would get excited about, which by the way, they got super excited about. That first year of a staff of about 35 high school teachers, 22 of them got level 1 certified.
Wow.
Right. So you could see like they were super excited. They viewed it as a challenge. It was something that they continued to work towards. And, over 50% of the staff getting certified and coming to these lunch and learns, like that was no small feat, but it was largely because we brought that idea to the table, fully fleshed out, ready to go. And that's easy to get behind, I think, if you're an administrator. So that would be the first one. The second one is like, know your staff. The staff that we were working with, they definitely view themselves as like experts at their craft. They value learning. I think they kind of valued like the competitive edge to it as well, like who was going to get level 1 certified first after all the lunch and learns were over with. And there was definitely kind of that edge that was brought to the table to like, let's improve. Let's learn this together. Let's get certified. I kind of like created some buzz around the badge that you would get that you could put in your email, and like the fact that you would get a certificate. And yeah, it's silly stuff, but at the same time, it does add like that extra layer of motivation. So just even knowing that the staff would respond to something like that was really important to picking the right theme that very first year. So conduct a needs analysis, ask around, get to know the staff better. And if you don't start it up right away in August or even September, like that's okay. A year-long PD can start in October and end in April. By May, they may be tuckered out. That's another thing that I've learned as well. Like, don't extend it to the very last week just for the sake of it. And so those are all things that I would say is like a new coach, maybe not at the table yet, maybe hasn't developed this collaborative relationship with administrators. Just come prepared, get to know both the admin and the teachers better, and I think it will really go off with a great success.
Yeah, well, and a couple of things, you saying that about bringing the plan to that particular principal, I think that's another good tip. Like, we knew that, he would probably be on board and a good proponent for it, so it was an easy in to start in the district, and then because of the success that year, that allowed you to then go to the middle school principal the next year and say, hey, this worked really well at the high school. So I think like having like a bright spot to like talk about within the district with other building principals was another good way to kind of expand it beyond just a single building. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, and I have one other follow-up question for you on that note.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to leverage it because I didn't even do it at all 3 schools at first, like you mentioned. So you kind of almost have to prove the concept, prove that it works, prove that it's successful, and that people will get behind it. And then it becomes so much easier to say, hey, let's try this again. Or it's easier to go back to that original principal and say, let's do level 2 next year. I mean, there's just so many ways that you can kind of pivot from that early success. So don't take that for granted and just start small and then leverage that to continue it on to, bigger and better heights later on.
Yeah. Well, and, going from, like Google level 1 to Google level 2, that's super easy to build on. I know now you're beyond that, right? Because like we've, done the certifications and it's really good PR. So I think sometimes that's a good place to get principals kind of hooked for this ongoing PD, because then you can say to the community, we have over half our staff is Google level 1 certified, right? In these tools that we use with your kids. So it's good PR. But once you got beyond those kind of, maybe a little bit easier to map out from like a thematic this session than this session and how they build on each other to lead to a certification. You got level 1 and level 2 behind you. Once you get to that point of something that's maybe not as outwardly tangible or measurable in your like thematic year-long PD, what's maybe some advice, or how did you approach like that next thing with your admin to, you'd already been through the new LMS. Now you're through Google level 1 and level 2. How did you move to the more like instructional kind of focused themes that spanned, a good portion of the year?
So that was definitely a more difficult transition, but the big thing that I wanted to do was stress they know a lot of the tools now. Let's work on the integration. Let's work on the strategy around using the tools. And so I think that was kind of the obvious next step for me. So one of the ones that we did after Schoology and Google level 1 and level 2 was we did like a year-long themed PD on the SAMR model. And we actually took all of the district purchased tools, and each month we would break them down using SAMR and give specific, like tangible recreations of lessons that would be across the spectrum. So like, what does using Pear Deck look like at a substitution level, all the way up to a redefinition level? And so teachers had the opportunity. I think, Justin, you were even there for one of the PDs that I did on this year-long theme. And I don't think it was Pear Deck that we broke down, but it was definitely one of them where we kind of showed like real-life examples of what this would look like in a teacher's classroom. We had teachers kind of self-analyze where they were with their comfort level with this tool. And then we worked on some tips and tricks in the tool to help them build their own skills so that they could then increase their own integration level with the tool. So it was a little bit of workshop. It was a little bit of skill building. But I think the thing that helped most were the tangible examples that they could see that helped them really clearly picture, oh, that's what that means. That's what that looks like. Here are some of the little shifts that I can take in my own practice to make a huge difference, not only in the engagement, but the effectiveness of the tool that I'm using or the instructional strategy that I'm using with my students. So that was kind of our focus for the next few years. And then I mentioned I got lucky with like the makerspace coming to the high school. So we did one on design thinking and STEAM and STEM, and that's an easy one to build a lot of like year-long PD around. And then recently, like I told you, the change of the teacher evaluation system and all of the things that go into being an effective teacher in that particular framework, that's another one that we use to build. So it's much more on the instructional strategies and the practice of teachers now, but that's because we did a lot of the training in the tools beforehand so that they came to the table with at least a baseline of skills needed to then start getting better at their own craft.
I love it. And I think I think it's important to note, too, that the district or building admin didn't come to you and say, hey, we have this new teacher evaluation system for the state now. Can you design PD around it to help? But you just kept a lookout and, kept your eyes and ears open for those opportunities to then naturally show your value and show how your coaching is part of this larger systemic process through kind of this theme of PD that you suggested throughout the year. So I guess just a little side note tip to coaches, just always keep your eyes and ears open for those opportunities where you can embed yourself to be really, helpful.
Yeah, and I even like too the fact that like the one I got to see with you, I think it might have been on what is now Flip. I think it might have been that one when I was there, but I really liked it because it was all these different tools that teachers could use, but you weren't necessarily overwhelming them or just like tossing a tool at them. You're giving them a very structured guide for where you are with the SAMR model, like where are you at with using technology in your classroom. There's different ways you can use Flip. So some of those teachers that were the high flyers are like, awesome, I can take the redefinition and go. Some of those other teachers like, all right, I'm going to stick with the substitution to see how this can kind of go forward too. So that was, I thought personally, I like what you did there. And like you said, all those tools, they got the knowledge on it based in now to now move on into a more instructional side. So that's awesome. All right. So, we like to finish this show here with our top 3 tips. Now, Tyler, you've been dropping tips all throughout this entire podcast. So I don't know where those tips line up with your top 3 tips or if they all shuffle in there or what.
I feel like Tyler just got a new line for his Twitter bio. # dropping tips.
Dropping tips, baby.
On RR Coachcast.
All right, I expect to fully see that on your Twitter. What is your Twitter, by the way? We'll just toss it out there real quick before our top 3 tips.
Well, if you can hear me over the drilling going on next door, my Twitter handle is @EdTechTyler. So pretty easy to remember. And, feel free to double check that I change my Twitter bio after this podcast drops. Feel free.
Excellent. Okay. So you're going to be on the lookout for it. Our viewers are going to be on the lookout for it, and go ahead and drop those tips.
So I think the first one's the most obvious. This probably falls flat, the whole year-long PD, if you don't know your staff and you don't know your admin, or at least have some sort of basic relationship with them, because there are certain things that they'll have to approve, they'll have to okay. And once again, if you are developing a program that isn't relevant to the needs of your staff, it's just going to be ineffective. So spend some time doing that first, building those relationships. That's probably a tip you could put in any of these podcasts, but I think for this one in particular, it's really important to start there. The next one is don't be afraid to try something new. I know for me, a couple of them were shoo-ins, the Google Level 1, Level 2, that's easy. There's a lot of curriculum already out there for that. But then when they brought to the table the makerspace, hey, design year-long PD on design thinking, I'm like, what the heck might this even look like? I have no idea. And so I used my resources. I worked with the teacher who was going to be doing the STEAM Studio class. What would be some things that you would want the other teachers to know that would help support your work? How do you want this new venture, this new class, this new program to be positioned to the rest of the staff? And she was really helpful. And so that was another thing is even though this was kind of scary, I didn't know where to start. I would just don't be afraid to try something new. Because in the end, that was one of our more impactful, successful years. So I really enjoyed that. And then I guess a third one would just be keep your expectations very clear. So I know, Justin, you said some flexibility is super important. I would say that's 100% true. But when you're developing a year-long PD program, it is good to have kind of everything structured out. Here's how long, here are the days when I'm in this building versus that building. Here are the topics we're going to be going over. Hey, I'd really love you to bring a device to this one. You don't need a device for that one. Just because, once again, I do this typically during lunch. It is voluntary. You have to keep it fun. You have to keep it light. And I think you have to keep the expectations very clear because, once again, I'm going to get you for about 20 minutes. By the time you heat up your lunch, you find me where I'm located. We kind of go through some of the material together. We have time for Q&A. And then they have to go back to class for their next bell. And so it happens very, very quickly. So striking the right balance between making content king, but also making it like relevant and practical for the amount of time you have. That's also really important as well.
Awesome. Look at all those tips dropped right there.
Sorry, I'm
Twitter
glad I
bio.
could, hold up to my reputation, I guess, as not only world famous, but also one who drops tips. So
that is why you're world famous. I don't know. Maybe that's the connection there that we're looking for. I don't know. But Tyler, awesome. You have once again done a very fantastic job of explaining how you can actually get like a thematic year-long theme in different ways, kind of no matter what topic it is, have something planned, ready to go, and show that to the principal. Because I mean, we've talked about a lot on this podcast, Katie. If you take something to your admin ready to go, more than likely they are going to say, awesome, go ahead and go with it.
Yes, Justin, I totally agree. Make admin's lives easier. That should be your mantra, and it will help move a lot of things along in your school as a coach.
All right. Well, Tyler, thanks again for coming in on this episode here. Tune in next time for a awesome episode that we're going to have coming up. We actually are going to have Adam Orez and Catherine Goyette coming on to the podcast to talk about the walking coach. So if you have had an opportunity to maybe interact with them on Twitter, see them at Twitter or at a conference with the walking coach, make sure you jump in on this one, because they're going to go into depth with what the walking coach is and how you can kind of implement that into your school district. And they have a lot of fun tips on that one as well.
Yes, so be sure to subscribe to Restart Recharge wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at RRCoachCast. And if you have an extra minute today or whenever you're finished listening, we would love if you would rate and review to help other coaches find this podcast.
And TikTok. Did you say TikTok?
I did not. Also TikTok, RRCoachCast.
I think you just want to pretend that TikTok doesn't.
I think I do too.
But as always, too, feel free to reach out to us and let us know the topics that are on your mind, because we will be able to then also flip that over and have an episode on it so that you can get some tips directly in and have kind of what your thoughts are for going into school year, something on the podcast that we can talk about too.
Yeah, so press the restart button.
Recharge your coaching batteries and leave feeling equipped and inspired to coach fearlessly with the Restart Recharge podcast.
A Tech Coach Collective.
Lost my breath there, so now we're good.
Editing's gonna have to.
I think it's me, so I think it's okay.
I was waiting for you to chime in, but I don't know if it is you or not.
Do you want me to do the next time? Tune in next time?
Yep. Hold on. I'll say so I don't sound so awkward with my Kind of what might be some tips for more of the... Sorry, there is such loud construction behind us.
That one I heard.
Okay, let me see where I was, if I can remember my question. Justin makes me double check if we're recording every time.
We are definitely recording.
Okay. Justin, I've been a hot mess without you here to get me in line. Okay, I'm ready.